Minister of National Security, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is sponsored by the Ministry of National Security.
The Nationwide 90 FM Schoolyard Tour 2025 is taking the vibes island-wide, straight to your schoolyard. Stay tuned to the E-Zone and find out which school they're going to visit next. It's all about empowering minds and igniting the fun. Expect live entertainment, games, and big surprises as we bring the Nationwide 90 FM energy to every stop. And you know we must stream it live on our YouTube channel at Nationwide 90 FM Live 2. It's the Schoolyard Tour. Catch the live stream on Nationwide's YouTube channel at Nationwide 90 FM Live 2. Keep your station locked to Nationwide 90 FM for more details. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. The Schoolyard Tour is brought to you by the Students' Loan Bureau, KFC, Tip Friendly Society, National Council on Drug Abuse, and ATL Automotive.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty.
Happy Monday. It's a beautiful Monday here in Kingston, and you are listening to JFJ's Let's Start Justice radio show. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at JFJ.
All right, so we're discussing a very interesting topic. For those who listen news, and I hope we all do, certainly for those who are paying attention on Nationwide News Network, you would have heard the matter involving the political ombudsman. And I believe some week ago, you had a representative from the Citizen Action for Free and Fair Election Cafe speaking on Nationwide this morning. So we're going to be discussing that topic, the silence of the referee, Jamaica's political ombudsman debate, and Tashwa James, our digital media officer, she did so well with that, headliner, if you will. So, very interesting topic, and we're going to be joined by the former political ombudsman, Donna Parchment Brown, who is an attorney at law, well respected in her field, well respected Jamaican generally. So, we're pleased to have her. But before we get into the topic, Jade, what else we have on the show to do before Mrs. Parchment Brown joins?
All right. Well, we have a few things. We have our right of the day and our trivia question. And we also have a quick update on the week that was. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think I can go forth with our Did You Know? So our Did You Know for today is about the political ombudsman's office. And it states that the office was originally established under the Political Ombudsman Interim Act in 2002, which we know would have been amended in 2024. And the purpose of this office is to ensure fairness and decency and non-violence in political campaigning, and its independence was protected by law to prevent political interference. So there would have been a section in the legislation that would protect the office from any political interference. For our trivia question for today, we're asking how many commissioners currently make up the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. So you can respond to that in the chat on YouTube. You can send a WhatsApp to 876-919-9955, or you can respond on our Instagram pages.
All right, so our usual week that was, we will take that on the second half of the program.
Sure.
But we just want to get straight into the topic today. So, Jamaica, we have a very good electoral system. We have a strong electoral commission of Jamaica. We have the political ombudsman that existed in various forms as far back as the 1970s. So this is not a new office, but we understand that as our democracy matures, we have to look at what we can strengthen to ensure that matters of anti-corruption generally, electoral oversight is there. And if we look at CAFE, for example, we no longer have to have an international agency like the Carter Center coming here in Jamaica to observe our elections. We have strengthened what we have. But what seems to still be an area of concern is the office of the political ombudsman. This was an interim act that was awaiting its rightful place in the Constitution so that you can have the protection of an entrenchment status where two-thirds majority vote in Parliament would see any changes. Independence is secured. JFJ, in our own submission to the Constitutional Reform Committee, we did not make it to the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Constitutional Amendment Act, but we made it in our general submission that, listen, this decision that was taken by the government to subsume the political ombudsman into the ECJ was a bad idea, should not have happened, and you need the political ombudsman as a body by itself entrenched in the Constitution. That was our call then, and our call remains now. Remove the office from the ECJ, in other words, repeal the act that was done 2024.
Yes.
And have the political ombudsman reinstated but strengthened. All right? Is there anything else, Jade, that I'm missing in terms of what we should be talking about?
No. It's definitely something that I think you've articulated, giving us the baseline fairly well. But, just to say that there would have been some recent comments that would have raised some concerns from our Justice Minister that would have indicated that since we've already taken this decision and it's been fully considered, there will be no consideration of a reversal of that decision. And that is certainly of concern to us.
Yeah, and before we bring in Mrs. Parchment Brown, just to say that the area of concern for us is that since this body was subsumed into the ECJ, there are several incidents that we have seen that no public statement was made. You remember that tussle down by St. Thomas, gun emerging and so on. Nothing from the ECJ in that very alarming incident. And then you have minor matters emerging that we did not hear from the ECJ. And we're going to have the conversation with Mrs. Donna Parchment Brown in terms of what that Amendment Act looks like, because certainly I'm still a little bit troubled that there is not clear articulation of the adjudication process. Who will sit on the committee as the political ombudsman? What are the processes and so on? So I'm told that Mrs. Parchment Brown is online now. Mrs. Parchment Brown, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm definitely online and love that intro that you did. Both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. Let us start, Mrs. Parchment Brown, in terms of just generally what your concerns are about where we are now with the process before we go back to what was the political ombudsman act, what was it intended to do, and so on. But what is your concern now about where we are?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to all of your listeners as well. And it's so important to have these spaces for us to talk and listen to one another.
Yes.
One of the first concern I had is that the Political Ombudsman Commission came out of a period of broad consultation in Jamaica about how we were to go forward as a democracy. The change that took place was not based on any consultation and was done very quickly and did not appear to take into account any comments that disagreed with the idea. The reason that was put forward for the legislation amendment is even more concerning because the reason put forward in the memorandum of objects and reasons was that the political ombudsman, myself, had demitted office in 2022 and up to 2024, no one had been appointed to carry out the important functions related to the political climate, political peace and harmony and resolving conflicts. And that's worrisome to me because the duty to appoint the ombudsman lies with the Governor General after consultation with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. So I find it a bit alarming that I failed to carry out my duty and I use that as a reason for going in another direction without giving any explanation for why I've not carried out my duty. So there are a number of issues, but maybe the most pressing one is this. The Political Ombudsman Interim Act provided that if you were an MP, that is a senator or a member of the lower house, you were not eligible to be political ombudsman. Compared to the ECJ, which when it was set up was designed to include representatives of political parties in the work that they are doing there. So there are clear difference in how they were established in terms of eligibility to be a member.
Yes.
We can see now why that would be the case, because currently there is at least one member of the ECJ who is a candidate for his political party and also holds an important office in his party. And he would have the right to also sit as ombudsman. We may have another candidate whose child may be a candidate in the election and who also holds an important office in the government and who would also be called upon to be political ombudsman. You can understand that the independent commissioners who have no political connection might find themselves in a very uncomfortable and unpleasant situation when trying to discuss how one member of a party may have committed an offense and may need to be called out for having committed a breach and to have some action taken against them or recommendation for action. And my third and last point, if I may, is that the concept of the Political Ombudsman Commission is that the person will do investigations, not just from complaints, but from observation. And those investigations and their recommendations, if necessary, would be made to the leaders of the relevant political parties. And that was part of the political parties' commitment to the Code of Conduct, that the leaders would then do what is necessary to carry forward the recommendations of the political ombudsman in those cases.
Just to go back to something you said, Mrs. Parchment Brown, to pick it up, the powers of the Governor General in appointment of a political ombudsman, that power was seemingly discretionary based on what you said. So in other words, the GG would consult but could act independently after consultation, or it has to be on the advice?
I think, well, it doesn't say on the advice. You may have the legislation in front of you. It says in consultation, after consultation. But the protocols, the traditions would be that the Governor General would not want to override both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, because the concept is of something that should be working together for the welfare of. So the way I read it is that ultimately it is in the authority and remit of the Governor General, but that he would do that based on working with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, and it's an important distinction just for the listeners, because, again, as we go through the constitutional reform process, that's an area that we've been looking at for appointment of sensitive positions. But Mrs. Parchment Brown, before we go to the break at 1:15, were you asked to return as political ombudsman? Are you able to disclose that?
I can. My term expired in November 2022. I was eligible for a further 5 years, but I was not invited, and it was clear that was not the direction in which they were going. And that's fine with me. I had a phenomenal 7 years of service to the people of Jamaica. Absolutely. And I'm definitely not available anymore for such a role.
All right. So, Mrs. Parchment Brown, we are going to take the break. But when we return, I want us to go through the Political Ombudsman Interim Act as it was designed. What were some of the powers and the objectives of that piece of legislation? And then we start looking at the Amendment Act itself and what are some of the gaps that we're seeing there.
A mother mother's journey of love shared from generation to generation. Give her the ultimate relaxation and escape to Adam and Eve Day Spa and Salon for a mommy-made new experience this Mother's Day, Sunday, May 11. Book now at www.adamandeve.dayspaja.com. Purchase gift certificates or call 876-754-6017. Get mom the perfect gift of love. This Mother's Day, let Team Adam and Eve take her on a spa journey. She deserves it.
Big news! The Big Bite Food Safety Show now airs on Nationwide 90 FM with your host, Alison Richards, the Food Safety Girl. Join Alison every Tuesday from 1 to 2 p.m. as she serves up expert advice, tips, and insights on everything food safety. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, food safety is everybody's business. Don't miss a bite of the action. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. Join us on the next episode for Street Food Chronicles. Are you being jerked over?
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're discussing the silence of the referee, discussing the office of the political ombudsman, and we're joined by former political ombudsman Donna Parchment Brown. Mrs. Parchment Brown, before the break, we wanted to ask you for our listeners, what were the duties of a political ombudsman under the Political Ombudsman Interim Act of 2002? And once you explain those duties, I would like an idea of, for example, how do those duties expand into times when we are not in the election period? Because I think there is some dispute as to whether or not the office needs to be a permanent office that is constantly present, or an office that only becomes useful during the election period.
Thank you so much. Well, let me start where you ended. It is absolutely not an election office. That's not the intention in the legislation. And in fact, legislation doesn't speak to election at all. Mm-hmm. The way the ombudsman has been involved in the election aspect is as part of the, I think it was called the Election Council, where several organizations, including the Political Ombudsman, the ECJ, CAFE, Director of the Broadcasting Commission, JCF, the Council of Churches, I think, and the JDF. I may have left some out, forgive me if I have. And we meet once the election is announced. That body is constituted, which I co-chaired with the Director of Elections. The idea was this was a body that once we're in election mode, if there were any issues, then those bodies would use their resources to do investigation and to assist in dealing with any problems. So, for example, one election, there was a lot of turmoil in a constituency. There was shooting, people were killed and so on. And we recommended to the appropriate body that campaigning be stopped in that constituency. So that's the way in which the ombudsman would be involved in the electoral aspect. And also on election day, we would sit throughout the election day and again use our resources to resolve any problems. But primarily the legislation was intended to be a way of strengthening the code of conduct. We may all recall that in a period of political turmoil, there were consultations between political actors, organizations, NGOs, members of the public, broad consultations across Jamaica, out of which came the Code of Conduct and the Political Ombudsman Commission. Also things like the Public Defender, the ECJ, INDICOM, and so on. All of these are products of broad consultation. There's a bit alarming when, you don't use consultation to change that. You asked me what the duties are. I don't have the Code of Conduct in front of me, neither do I have the Political Ombudsman Interim Act. But as you rightly said, and has been so often misunderstood, it was interim not because it's a temporary office, but because the office would subsist until protected by the Constitution. Then there would be another legislation to give it the constitutional protection. Section 3 outlines that.
Yes.
Now, yes, you...
No, we're listening and agreeing.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of the duties of the office, there were a couple of duties. One is to investigate any complaints regarding any breach of any agreement, code, or other uh, agreement in place between different political parties. It was also intended to deal with those actions by political actors or political organizations that would tend to harm the good relations between supporters of different political parties. So very broad, but at the core, how do we preserve people's right to participate in a democracy by not letting them feel threatened by, whether it's by weapons, whether not being able to campaign in a community because you're being blocked out. Because, we will have had this thing where people block candidates from coming into areas to campaign. Those are some of the frequent complaints received. Other kinds of intimidation, using funds to improperly influence electoral outcomes. All of these were part of the code of conduct. And if you breach those were matters for the political ombudsman to investigate. Let me say clearly, some of the things that would be breaches of the code could also be matters to take you to court. And what the legislation also said, the fact that you have filed a matter in court does not prevent the ombudsman from doing investigation and ruling on the matter. Because we understand that if you're going to go to court, there's a time and there's a cost and there's a relationship cost to all of that. And if you're in the height of a conflict in a community or in a country, you want somebody to be able to intervene quickly, cauterize the problem, discuss with the relevant people, and try to come to an outcome that stops the uproar and the upheaval and the complaint, and also potentially prevents a repetition of a complaint generally, but particularly between the people involved in that particular issue. So really the ombudsman, some people like to think of the ombudsman as a policeman, and there is that policing aspect, but the facilitator of an improvement in the political climate, recognizing that we have seen in Jamaica where words and actions have led to really awful political situations in Jamaica in and out of election season. I hope I've answered, Jane, what you needed.
Yes,
It was a long question.
yeah, I think so. I think though, well, I'll allow Michael to go.
Well, I think the question that I have, because I'm still seeing some comments here. Nationwide has a very active YouTube chat, and I'm looking at some of the comments, and they're still not convinced. In their minds, not the ECJ, the political ombudsman was only needed during an election cycle. What did the office do outside of that period? And I will preempt by saying I remember your office launching a book shortly before you demitted office. So if you could, just give that perspective in terms of public education and so on, and anything else.
Absolutely, thank you. We did consider that public education, not just for members of the broader public, but also for political actors, was very important. So the civics handbook was important for the public, but also shared with the parliamentarians. We also, tried very hard to develop youth engagement in the political space, and we developed an organization called PARI, Political Awareness and Respect Initiative, made up of essentially tertiary education students and other young people. And just putting that out there that, we own the country, we own the democracy, we have a duty to do what is required. And frankly speaking, outside of the 3-month campaign period or 6-month campaign period, I don't remember now, there were lots of issues that arose that needed to be resolved. And I chose to use mediation as a preferred mechanism over some of the other mechanisms, because that is where I had some expertise. So I worked a lot with the general secretaries of the two political parties, major political parties, as was the recommendation of my predecessor, Bishop Harold Blair, and which was consistent with what Mr. Justice Carr, his predecessor, did. So one of the things we have to understand is that because a matter is not in the public, it doesn't mean it's not happening. You know, a thing may not be on the news for a week, but it doesn't mean that it's not significant and that people are not working on it. So, for example, because we still have crime and violence in Jamaica, doesn't mean we close the police force. There's work to be done.
Yes.
And I think that is something that people need to understand, that institutions are not established because we want people to keep doing the wrong thing. If you find that there's a decline in certain behavior, it may mean that the institutions are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And therefore, some of the problems you might have seen 20 years before, 10 years before, 5 years before, you're not now seeing. But the office was working every day. I agree with you. I would agree with anyone that there were not complaints every day or even every week. But there were enough issues that needed to be cauterized that kept us busy and caused me not to sleep well at night. For 7 years, I always wondered when I went to bed, what am I going to see in the media when I wake up in the morning?
Yes.
Who is going to write me tomorrow morning or call me about something? No, yes, there's a heightened amount during the election period. So during that time, my phone would be full of calls, videos, messages from people all across Jamaica talking about issues that they wanted to be able to share with someone. Some of those issues I may have shared with the police, because we had a team of 14 police officers across Jamaica to facilitate investigations. But one of the problems we faced is that while people are comfortable coming to the Ombudsman to talk about these matters confidentially, they did not necessarily want these matters to then go into the court. They wanted the Ombudsman to try and talk to the relevant people and stop the problem they were seeing.
So the mediation aspect was quite critical.
Absolutely
yeah.
critical.
One of the things, Mrs. Parchment Brown, is the statement that the ombudsman was a toothless tiger.
Yes.
And the politicians themselves often ignored the recommendations or the fines when imposed. And I think anyone can take up any media article and read also some of the disparaging comments that a few political leaders have made and others just ignored. Can you walk us through? My memory of the act is that the fine that you could impose was 50,000 Jamaican dollars.
That fine was a fine if they refused to come or they came and said what wasn't true.
Okay.
So once, I think only in one case, I issued a summons for at that stage a candidate to come in who had been resisting coming in despite my calls. And in that case, the person came in with another member of the party and we were able to sort the matter out. And I'll say this. In the 7 years, I don't think there were 5 political people who refused to come in. In the 7 years, not as many as 5 who refused to come in when called by the candidate, called by the ombudsman. And in fact, only in the case of 2 that they actually refused. The others 3 may have neglected to come in. And so I think it's a very inaccurate recollection of what happened during the period to say that most of them ignored.
Okay.
Most of them came in. Over 80% of those in respect of whom there were complaints came in. They came sometimes accompanied by their general secretaries of their parties. They came accompanied sometimes by attorneys. And I've had many of those where they came in with attorneys. And we scheduled until we were there. Sometimes it took 2 or 3 meetings. But I think, as I recall, there's one major situation where I made a recommendation to a party leader and they said no, they would not do it. I think there was maybe one other situation where a person who is very well known in the public for being problematic continued in that style when dealing with the ombudsman, but he did it with the media, he did it with other political party, he did it with his own party. So that was an
But not with the
situation.
ombudsman.
But he did not come into the ombudsman.
Ah.
So that was consistent with his normal behavior.
Okay.
But for 80% of the complaints or more, the candidates or the people involved, because out of election time too, they would come in. And let me also
We have to take the
remind you
break
that-
now, Mrs. Parchment
Okay.
Brown, but please stay with us and we'll pick up your thought.
Okay.
Tune in to Nationwide 90 FM on Tuesday, April 29 from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. for the live sectoral presentation by the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang. Also, you can view the presentation on Nationwide 90 FM's YouTube channel at Nationwide 90 FM Live 2. So tune in to Nationwide 90 FM on Tuesday, April 29 from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's the live sectoral presentation by the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is sponsored by the Ministry of National Security.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're discussing the matter of the political ombudsman, and we're joined by Mrs. Donna Parchment Brown, who is the former political ombudsman, the last political ombudsman before the office was subsumed into the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Mrs. Parchment Brown, you were making a point before we went to the break?
Yes, I was just reinforcing my own clear recollection that persons once requested to come into the ombudsman came in,
Yes.
except for about 5 situations
Yes.
in the 7 years. In addition to that, the ombudsman frequently traveled outside of Kingston across Jamaica to respond to things we had heard that were going on in different areas, met with people on the ground in communities, talked about some of their issues, and were able to gather information that we could use in support of any mediation that was going on in relation to any particular issue. And in particular, leading into elections, that frequent abuse of the electorate by doing political work, road building, road bush cleaning, and all these other things that were being done in the lead up to elections, which were in breach of the code because they were using public funds for political purposes. And so I do believe that the recollection is more of when the wrong is done than of
Yes.
what the action is that's taken to deal with it.
And you made such a very good point, because I think there is some misunderstanding among some that the political ombudsman only spoke when you have some signs placed up, whether green, orange, or another color, in constituencies, rather than understanding that the political code of conduct would also speak to matters of maladministration, using the public funds and so on, in ways that it ought not to. And when you speak on those matters, I believe it's important so we understand how a democratic process ought to be. And I think I can speak for JFJ that the presence of the ombudsman, though we would like for the enforcement and the fines to be stronger, which we have called for, the presence of the ombudsman as that independent, impartial arbiter in these matters, I believe, was quite important. And that is something, that contributed towards our call that, listen, reinstate the office, but in that reinstatement, ensure that the powers are stronger. So that is something that JFJ has called for, Mrs. Parchment Brown.
And I see where the Constitutional Reform Commission has taken forward the recommendation that the Political Ombudsman Commission be reinstated and that the legislation, the amendment be repealed, because the current solution, while perhaps well-intended, when a minister says that people would have more respect for the ECJ than for the standalone ombudsman, I believe that my interaction with the leaders of the political parties, the executive members, and many parliamentarians over the 7-year period showed that they understood the importance and significance of the office to their own conduct. Don't get me wrong, most of our politicians behave properly, whether they're councillors or MPs, candidates or supporters. However, many political actors over the 7-year period gave me commendations, as well as people out there in the public with whom I would interact. I stood very strongly on that foundation of public support. So the idea that people would support a body of 9 people but not one would then say, when your matter goes to court, whether it's a parish court or the Supreme Court that, people don't, one person can't make a decision. So is it that a political ombudsman, an individual, can't make a recommendation to a party leader as to whether a statement was defamatory and should be taken back, or harmful and should be taken back? But at the same time, a court, an individual judge, can make a decision on defamation.
Yes.
It's contradictory, and the ombudsman has the powers of a puny judge.
Yes.
So I think it's a bit contradictory. And the last suggestion I heard on the operation of the commission is that perhaps the ECJ could appoint somebody similar to the director of elections to deal with the political ombudsman matters, essentially do an investigation, and then send that up now to the 8 commissioners made up of 4 politically appointed ones and 4 independent ones. They will decide if what the ombudsman sends up to them requires action or not, and what action is required. It's cumbersome. It's inconsistent with the legislative change that was made. And I don't see how it in any way improves on finding a worthy Jamaican. We can't find one Jamaican who the political party leaders and their supporters would respect to carry out this function.
But here is my challenge, Mrs. Parchment Brown. Even, and I know you're not supporting the suggestion, you're just outlining what it is. But here is our challenge here at JFJ, even with the political ombudsman being subsumed into the ECJ. What are the likely effects of the ECJ that has come such a far way with us as Jamaican citizens respecting it and it being a model agency for other countries that look on Jamaica and say we have done well? If the ECJ effectively would be making pronouncements on matters that could be testy politically, how could that influence the perception by some where our preferred politicians may very well find themselves being in conflict with a recommendation made by the ECJ, not find liking with a recommendation made by the ECJ? And sometimes we can become a little bit emotional as Jamaicans, and then we make comments that are not necessarily kind, or we may say that an institution is acting politically because they have made a pronouncement on our preferred politician. And could that, in those instances, undermine the function of the ECJ, or put it in a position where there is the perception, not necessarily the reality, but the perception that the ECJ may be politically aligned? Is there such a concern that you also have?
That's a real concern. I think we have done such an injustice to the ECJ by locating these responsibilities there. Every political ombudsman has been accused of bias by both sides of the political fence and their supporters. It's par for the course because you're touching on people and things that are very close to their hearts. The ECJ has a lot of work to do and has, as you said, garnered global support. The Political Ombudsman's Commission was written up in the last OAS report after they came to Jamaica for elections and commended as a best practice. And now we're taking that best practice to ruin or harm another institution, which is also a best practice. Because both internally and externally, there is a risk. If you are a representative of the party against whom a complaint has been made, and you may have a party line that you are obliged to carry in the ECJ, it could create some conflict in there, or minimize the ability of the independent commissioners to speak frankly and freely about how they see the particular complaint. And as you have said, many persons may find it appropriate, although I'm sure it would be wrong, because only decent, respected, and distinguished people are on the ECJ. Nonetheless, I do not believe that would deter persons from accusing them of bias, depending on where they stand on the issue that the ECJ has made a recommendation on. And it does stop the ECJ from being proactive. Things come up in the media. I would call people because something came up in the media. didn't always wait for somebody to make a complaint. I don't see how 8 people do that, and I don't even see how 8 people come to a decision on some of these matters that really need a quick intervention
Yes.
by an individual who is, able to do something productive.
So that even Jade and I were discussing it, that even that process itself, when you look at the Political Ombudsman Interim Act, that process was clearly outlined, but it became unclear when it was subsumed into the ECJ. But just a quick question, Mrs. Parchment Brown, from me. How much funding did the office get when you were there versus what you know now to be allocated to the ECJ for this function?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. What a question. I've
I'm
used
a
the
little
number
rabble
25.
rouser, forgive me.
No, these are important matters. And one of the reasons that had been flagged early in the day for closing the political ombudsman's office was that it was costly.
Yes.
It was costing people money, and it was necessary to spend that money for a number of reasons that people put forward. I use the number 25 million, but it's less than that per year. And maybe there would have been 2 years when it would have been as much as 25 million, but most years, less than 25 million was spent. And, it was allocated, and less than that was spent. So that I was truly shocked when I heard that a year ago, $60 million was allocated to the ECJ to carry out the functions of the Political Ombudsman's Commission. There are already 8 or 9, including Director of Elections, commissioners who are already being paid. And I thought that was one of the reasons that this would be an additional activity for them to do. So I'm not sure how often they meet, whether it's monthly or weekly or daily. I don't know how often the ECJ works. I don't know if there are full-time commissioners among them other than the Director of Elections. I don't know what were the tasks that the Parliament saw that would have to be undertaken that would require a top-up of 60 million on the ECJ's budget. But we never got, in my term, and certainly in Bishop Blair's term, never got more than 25 million, and usually less than that. So to move from 25 million, close an office, and move it somewhere else and give it 60 million, it's mind-boggling for me. And I think really goes against everything that was being said about, the cost and so on and so forth.
And we have since heard, yes, go ahead.
On that point, may I say, I would have understood if 60 million was allocated last year, because in making the transition, it was understood that you had 6 or 7 staff members who would have to be paid redundancy. You had people who maybe were up for retirement and they may have needed gratuities or compassionate grants. As far as I know, the staff of the Ombudsman's Commission have not received a penny in termination with this change. And I would have thought that everybody should have been paid, not me, I had left already, but the surviving members of staff should have been paid redundancy. Some were there for 20 years and walked away with not a cent. The gratuities that the Ministry of Finance had indicated from 2012 should have been paid to them, and their contracts changed from various reasons. This was never done by the appropriate authorities, and no, that's not been done, nor was any effort made to provide them a gratuity or a compassionate grant in recognition that these people had worked in an organization, some for 5 years, some for 12 years, some for 18 years, some for 20 years, walking away without a cent. I could understand if that was why the 60 million was allocated. But to allocate 60 million and then the as far as we know, the local government elections came, we're not aware of any cost associated with that. The whole year has gone by, we're not aware of any cost associated with the duties of the Ombudsman in the last year. And we're now, I guess they have another 60 million, I'm not sure to do what.
All right. Thank you so much. Something to pursue in terms of understanding. Last comment from you, Mrs. Parchment Brown, before we leave.
let me say, I have no battle with any political leader, the Prime Minister, the Minister of
Justice.
Justice, or anyone else. But what I do know is that the general secretaries of the political parties worked well with the ombudsman, and that helped us to deal with a lot of issues in a timely manner. I've had complaints from the Prime Minister and other high ranking members of political organizations during the term, and I did not hear anyone say what was done was unacceptable. The notion that, for example, returning officers can intervene in a constituency, in a conflict between candidates, MP candidates, and summon them in on these matters of behavior and handle it properly, I think we've done an injustice to the returning officers. In my opinion, Electoral Commission, a worthy, highly respected organization, but the Political Ombudsman Commission is not a good fit in or out of election time. Even worse in election time, when there's a potential that any recommendation they make may turn into a comment on whether the elections are being properly conducted. So I would pray that those who have the ability to consult, 1 year later they can look, it's not achieved the objectives, it's not achieved anything that we can look to. Repeal the legislation, name a political ombudsman, pay the staff what should be due to them, and then do a consultation in the coming year to determine what is the best thing to do.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Parchment Brown. We have to leave it there. We really do appreciate your joining the show. Have a good day.
Thank you for having me, and congrats on the great work you're doing.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We take the break.
Hiring is tough. You spend weeks, maybe months searching but still can't find the right fit. And even when you do, onboarding, payroll, and benefits become another headache. Stop wasting time. Let Talent Box Caribbean do the work at a fraction of the cost. From sourcing to interviewing, we do it all. Don't settle for the wrong hire. Schedule your strategy call today. Call 876-960-0066 or visit www.talentboxcaribbean.com. Talent Box Caribbean, connection made easy.
The nationwide 90 FM Schoolyard Tour 2025 is taking the vibes island-wide, straight to your schoolyard. Stay tuned to the E-Zone and find out which school they're going to visit next. It's all about empowering minds and igniting the fun. Expect live entertainment, games, and big surprises as we bring the nationwide 90 FM energy to every stop. And you know we must stream it live on our YouTube channel at Nationwide 90 FM Live 2. It's the Schoolyard Tour. Catch the live stream on Nationwide's YouTube channel at Nationwide 90 FM Live 2. Keep your station locked to Nationwide 90 FM for more details. All this and more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. The Schoolyard Tour is brought to you by the Students' Loan Bureau, KFC, Tip Friendly Society, National Council on Drug Abuse, and ATL Automotive.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We were joined earlier by former Political Ombudsman Mrs. Donna Parchment Brown, and we have been very clear in our call, Jade, here at JFJ, that we need the Political Ombudsman to be reinstated, but certainly not to what it was before. We have made the call for the Political Code of Conduct to have penalties attached to it. And we heard from the Minister of Justice, not necessarily to our call, but generally calls like those, suggesting that you don't want to criminalize, I believe was the word he used, the Political Code of Conduct. You want to more encourage through education. But respectfully, I think a bit of both is needed. To whom much is given, much is expected. And if we can't have our political leaders adhering to that code of conduct, what else do we expect from the citizens of Jamaica? If you can't carry yourself in an ethical manner, what else do we expect from the citizens of Jamaica? So I believe that the political ombudsman again should be reinstated, but with stronger powers. The fines itself should be increased. And I believe that the political code of conduct, it's important that some aspects of that carry greater penalties. But I think the ECJ and the office being subsumed there was a bad idea. And we've heard from the Minister of Justice, the Honorable Delroy Chuck, in recent times, saying that he has not heard from the ECJ on matters, and he would have liked to have heard from the ECJ. But here's the challenge I'm having. When laws or policies are passed, promulgated, who follows up? What monitoring is done to ensure that what was passed was effective? It made sense. We have done some evaluation, and then we're having ongoing dialogue to ensure that it is working. What I'm sensing here is that there was the increased calls in recent times from the former political ombudsman, CAFE, NIA, and others, and then you had the minister saying, not going to reinstate, but I'm concerned. And I think Minister Delroy Chuck should answer the reasonable call or question posed by Mrs. Parchment Brown regarding the amount of funds that the ECJ has been allotted or allocated. Because if the reason was that the political ombudsman as a standalone was so expensive for carrying out that function, then it is a little bit confusing, if you will, that the ECJ had gotten a greater amount. But, you know, generally, Jade, you do the school interventions, and the knowledge of democracy and the importance of democratic participation is not where it should be. And I think there needs to be the political ombudsman carrying out that duty, or some public education within the ECJ carrying out that duty to educate people about the role of democracy, the electoral process, the role of the Prime Minister versus the head of state. Those things are important, because if you listen, quite frankly, sometimes when MPs are bemoaning that people are calling their phones all hours of the night or about some light post or so on, I say, what is the role of the councillor, the role of the other institutions like the National Work Agency and so on? So I think general that is important. I think there are other reasons why the voter turnout is so low. People aren't happy. They don't have the trust. But beyond that, though, I think there is a general lack of understanding of democratic process and the importance of participating in it.
I agree with you that there is certainly a need for increased civic education and a need for us to more understand what participation in our democracy really means.
And be respectful.
Yes.
Because you say, I don't chastise persons, but even reading some of the comments on the chat here, how do we have respectful engagement and dialogue? Where if there is a difference of opinion, we can share it. We can have conversations, ask probing questions. JFJ, what is your mandate? Explain it to me, which is why we have the show. We don't have money as an NGO. We have to sit and write proposals and do fundraising, so your skill sets move from an attorney for you, and doing fundraising activities to come here and be journalists so we can have the conversations weekly.
Yes.
And we make disparaging comments. So when we talk about democratic participation, it's also understanding that we have respectful dialogue. And that is something I really urge us to think through a little bit. Yeah?
Yes, for sure.
All right. So tomorrow is the peaceful protest. And I want to emphasize the word peaceful here. A journalist from another radio station called me saying that several people had engaged the station saying that they want to come out and support, but there is fear that the protest may become violent. Let me say this. We have articulated to everybody that we've invited on our social media post that this is a peaceful protest. And that is why on the flyer, you see that being the biggest font size, because we respect law and order, public safety must be maintained, and anybody coming out in support of JFJ and the call that is being made must respect that. We've heard that there's going to be some counter-protest, and I would hope that those who are doing the counter-protest would respect law and order as well and be peaceful in whatever engagements you're doing so that we can all be out there articulating what we're out there articulating. And for JFJ, it's not an anti-police protest. Let me be very clear. This is a pro-human rights, pro-accountability protest where we are reiterating our call for body-worn cameras and other systemic reforms. This is not a protest against the police. This is a pro-accountability protest that when the police is in conflict or we see controversial shootings, we know that there is independent account by way of the body-worn cameras and so on. That's all that we're doing. All right, so I want to assure that the protest is a peaceful one, and you're certainly welcome to join us and make the calls known with us. It's a call for body-worn cameras, a call for the timeline, a call for improvement in the Jamaica Constabulary Force Act, where we see the Police Service Act itself, replacing the JCF Act, and so on. So that is the call that we're having. So join us tomorrow. We're going to be out by halfway 3, Jade?
Yes, we'll be out by halfway 3 nearby the transport center there across from JN, around that
1
area.
to 3 o'clock. We'll have water and so on for you. Bring your what you call it? The sun what? What you call that thing?
Your sunscreen.
Sunscreen. I'm getting older.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and just to reiterate it, particularly, and you know that I can be easily offended. But
Jade is so stressed out reading this comment.
Particularly as the person that has been in partnership with the person in the
Doing
organization that has done the trainings, that has done the meetings.
569 over a 3-year period.
Absolutely, that has been out on the road with the DVIC, volunteering my time and effort to ensure partnership with the JCF. Currently in domestic violence group, offering up my time at all hours to the JCF in partnership with them. I'm immensely offended by these comments that we are against the JCF, when all we have called for is the support of those good officers that continue to do good work.
And we stand with our officers, of course. All right. So who is the winner of the trivia?
So we do have a winner of our trivia question for today. The trivia question was related to the ECJ and the number of commissioners on the ECJ. The answer for the question is 9, and the winner of the question is Huey Marr on our Instagram stories.
Not news commentator this week.
No, not news. News commentator seems to have been busy in office this week.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so that's where we have to leave it. So have a good Monday. To our listeners, we thank you always, and thanks to the European Union for sponsoring this show. Have a good day.
Jamaicans for justice, the people's champion. Justice for all, justice under the law, justice Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. How come many we are one in a Jamaica? Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
Equality. There is no reason why I can't do what men always do. Split everything evenly. Jobs,